Hello, my name is Stephen Bowens. I am a part-time lecturer at Cornwall College, and I also run H2O Training Limited, and I do quite a lot of work for the Your Shore Beach Rangers project. I'm here today to share with you some experiences and some things that I learned from an expedition in 2012, where we rowed across the Atlantic Ocean from La Gomera in the Canaries to Barbados in the Caribbean. So just to help guide us through this, I've got a PowerPoint to share with you. And the idea of this really is to consider some of the things that we learned in terms of leadership and management. You can see from the video clip that we were in effect we were in a quite small rowing boat. We did this expedition completely unsupported, so there was no backup. There was no safety boat or yacht or anything else. We were completely independent and self-sufficient, which provided the opportunity for us to really think about what was important in terms of how a team can work together effectively. And it also highlighted some really important points to do with leadership and management. But we weren't the first people to have tried to row across the Atlantic. In actual fact, amazingly, the first people to row across the Atlantic Ocean were Frank Samuelson and George Harbaugh in 1896, a feat that wasn't replicated for many, many years later. They were set the task by the New York Times, or the New York Times posted a challenge for anybody to row across the ocean, and they offered a huge pot of money for anybody who could achieve this. And Frank and George were two Norwegian fishermen who took their standard rowing dory, fishing dory, and set off across the Atlantic and succeeded, made it all the way from New York to the Isles of Scilly. And in those days, the only way to get back across the Atlantic was in a steam ship. So they then rowed to France to pick up a paddle steamer, which then ran out of fuel on the way back, only about 200 miles from New York. And the captain ordered all wood on board to be broken down to be used as fuel. And Frank and George refused to give up their rowing boat, so they launched it over the side of the paddle steamer and rowed the last 200 miles back to shore. A story which is very, very little known, but I think a phenomenal testament to human endeavor and perseverance. A few things that I learned, I think we all did, was that you can't swim against the tide. What we need to do in the ocean and in the environment is we need to work with the environment. If we work against the environment, at best, it'll be very difficult. And at worst, we just won't go anywhere. In actual fact, it may be dangerous. So we, in our planning stages, really needed to think about what is the environment doing? How can we move with the environment to help it, to use it to help us achieve what our ultimate ambition is? And actually, the environment at this latitude in the UK, I live in Cornwall, is such that we have predominantly southwesterly winds. We couldn't row from here straight across the Atlantic, which is why we moved all of the boat and all the equipment down to La Gomera. And then from there, we still had to row 100 odd miles down the west coast of Africa before we could pick up a trade wind and current that would help us to go across. So it's about working with the environment rather than against it. I think planning is really important with any expedition and actually any project that you're going to do at all. We planned and came up with some great ideas, but we put it to test. So we did a test run. We rowed across the Adriatic and went to Venice, actually. And it took us about 24 hours to get across. And we learned a great deal through doing those trials. Lots of things that we thought were very straightforward turned out to not be actually as straightforward as we thought. So all best laid plans often fail at first encounter with the enemy, as the saying goes. And we learned a huge amount about our equipment, and also we learned a huge amount about each other. One of the key things that we learned was that actually we didn't all necessarily complement one another. And after the initial sea trials, we had a bit of a switching round of our team to make sure that we had the team that was most likely to be successful at achieving the ultimate goal. We learned that having the right team around you is really, really important. And that doesn't necessarily mean having the same people. So if we were all exactly the same, we wouldn't have been able to achieve the task in hand. We had quite a range of people. There was 4 of us on board, myself, Simon Osborne, Maren Medak and Alistair Humphreys. Maren is very much into his engineering. He's got a good understanding and he's got a very engineering mind. Simon has a huge amount of experience of expeditioning and navigation, and Alistair is an adventurer and makes a living out of doing adventures and talking to corporations about that. And I think I brought a certain amount of seamanship to the group. So we all had our own areas of responsibility and our own areas of expertise. And that was really, really important. We also realized just how slow progress might be. So when we set out on this project, it was already underway whenever I joined, and that was still 12 months to go. And actually, those 12 months were really, really busy. And when you put everything down on a sheet, it didn't look like that much. But there's lots of things that we were planning to do that ended up taking a lot longer than we thought they would. The other thing that we learned was really important was the importance of asking for help when we need it. So when we were rowing, having a little niggle and in the ocean, the skin problems are quite a common occurrence because of all the salt and trying to stay clean. So having a little niggle like that initially doesn't seem like a big deal, but actually you need to accept that you need some help. That might be that you need to take some time off the oars to go and treat that problem, whatever it is. And then that means that you need to be able to accept the help from other people. And the other people in the right team will always be willing to step forward and help as long as they have time and expertise to do so. So the actual trip that we undertook was, as I say, from La Gomera in the Canaries, which was here. We rowed south and then basically just turned right, and we rowed west to the Caribbean. A total distance of just over 3,000 miles, so quite a long way to be rowing. So 3,200 miles to be precise. The amount of energy I worked out was roughly about just under 300,000 calories, or to put it in layman's terms, just over 1,000 Mars bars worth of energy. On average, rowing strokes, we did about 37,500 strokes a day. Which I worked out was roughly about 1,703,520 rowing strokes if you want to row across the Atlantic, if any of you are thinking about doing that. But the physical impact or the physical challenge of this is considerable. It's a lot of repetition of movement. It puts a lot of strain on very specific parts of your body, and any system that you put a strain on a specific part of it, that system needs to be prepared for it. And I think our planning was really, really important. And this isn't, I know this looks like a drug deal that's just about to go off, but it's actually us preparing the equipment, removing all of our food, which was freeze-dried from any packaging, and packaging it up into a minimal amount of packaging possible. That reduced space, it reduced weight in the boat, and it meant that we could have everything stacked away, ready to go. One of the things that you might find quite useful in terms of planning is we kind of applied Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, a very famous book to do with planning and management. And there's an aspect of that, a matrix, if you like, which he comes up with, which I have found very, very useful. And it effectively encourages you to think about the jobs that you've got to do, the tasks that you've got to do, as being urgent, non-urgent, important, and not important. So things that are urgent and important, these tend to be crises. So these are the things that, in terms of our planning for the boat, maybe something came up that we didn't expect. It could be that we got sent some electrical equipment and it didn't work, or it wasn't compatible with the boat. Day to day, we deal with this all of the time. We get something that comes out from the left field and we just didn't expect it to happen. This is a very stressful environment to work in. And we really want to try and avoid working that environment as much as we can. The other quadrant is urgent and not important. These are interruptions. And these are classics for me, and I think for everybody. Checking social media, hooking up with friends, which is, maybe that is important, but maybe it's not. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But those things can seem important, especially when we have an urgent, real important thing. We often procrastinate and spend times in the things that aren't important, but we think are urgent, we feel are urgent. Then we also have the quadrant of not urgent and not important. These are other distractions. These are kind of daydreaming things to take us away from the other things that we maybe should be working on. And then finally, we have the area of the quadrant that we want to really work in. That's goals and planning. That's not urgent, but it is important. That's future planning. And the longer we spend in this area, the less time we spend in the urgent, important area. We can't spend our whole time in here because there'll be things that we can't plan for and prepare for, which will come up and be urgent and important. But this as a format, I personally find really, really useful. And I have when I was working at the college, I had a little whiteboard and I would have this crossed off and I would use this to move my tasks around, which was quite useful. Having the right team, as I mentioned, having the right team, as I mentioned earlier, is really, really important. We are all quite different people, although I think we're all interested and involved in adventurous sports, but we are different people, and we were quite concerned about what would happen whenever we fall out, whenever we have a big argument. And amazingly, through the whole of our trip, we never had a single argument. And one of the key things that helped with that, even though we were sleep deprived, sometimes scared because of the environment, and sometimes very, very stressed because of the environment, we managed to maintain mutual respect for one another. And that respect didn't just happen. It wasn't something that we just happened to have. It was something that we planned to have. So before we left, we decided what our own specific areas of responsibility would be, and that we could discuss, and that person was responsible for making decisions related to that task. For instance, Simon has a lot of experience of navigation. So in terms of our navigation, he made the decision and was responsible for the navigation of our boat. He was responsible for us to land in Barbados. We could discuss the options, and we could discuss his opinions, but he made the decision, and before we left, we all agreed that we would respect that decision. And as it turned out, as we got close to Barbados, I didn't agree with one of the decisions that he made. In fact, I felt very strongly that because I worked in Barbados for a prolonged period of time, and I know the local winds around there, I didn't think we were going to hit the island given the speed and the bearing that we were rowing at. But I respected the decision that he made, and we went with it, and he was absolutely right, because we made the decision of who had responsibility for what in a situation where we were well nutritioned, we were well rested, we were on shore planning, and we were calm and confident in our decisions. And that really helped. As a bit of an aside, part of our planning was making sure that we were physically and mentally prepared for the journey. So I've already talked about, we rowed across the Adriatic, but actually physically we needed to have enough energy reserves. So a male rower rowing 10 hours a day, we were actually rowing 12 hours a day. We would do 2 hours rowing, 2 hours rest. We would do that all day, every day, 24 hours a day. But the research suggests that an average man might burn 6,500 calories a day. However, you can't really eat that many calories. So you can consume around about 5,000 calories a day, which means that we're losing about 1,500 calories every day whilst we're on the water. So that you can keep going, in the planning, we then need to prepare for that by actually gaining body weight. So the suggested gain was 9.5 kilos for me, which is about 73,000 calories, which was one of the more enjoyable parts of the preparation for the row, I have to say. There were times when we were doing the row when I was scared, and I'm sure the other guys would admit there was times when they were as well. We were, when we left on the 12th of December, we went in a weather window between two storms, and within 48 hours, we were in the middle of probably some of the worst weather that we had on the whole journey. At one point, we had to put out a sea anchor, which is like a parachute that floats in the water, and it keeps the boat pointing into the wind and into the waves. So the waves were enormous. If you can imagine the Cornwall College buildings, certainly Newquay building, waves, it's similar in height and size to that. And they don't break in totality, but they do break at the top. And having the sea anchor keeps the boat pointing into them, so it's less likely that the boat's going to capsize, which it did on a few occasions. In that situation, you can't row, so we locked ourselves in. There's a tiny little cabin at the front, and in fact, myself and Maren were in there, and effectively we would have to spoon each other and slide down in there and shut a watertight seal so that we could stay safe, and if the boat capsized, it would roll back up again. That was a terrifying experience. We spent a whole night like that. The daily routine, however, helps. The sun comes up every single morning, and even when you're scared, and even when things are growing really difficult and very, very hard, it's worth remembering that it never stays like that. The sun comes up in the morning, and as soon as you warm up and you get some food into you, life seems much better and you can carry on with the day. I think just getting through those dark patches, it's important to remember that. There's always going to be other challenges which we had. For instance, seasickness. I won't show you the next photo of this, but this is Maren eating some food, and the next photo is of it, unfortunately, going back into the bag again. But those are challenges that are set out to us. Other things you need to think about is an unfortunate picture is how you, after you've eaten lots of it, how do you deal with the waste that comes out of that? Our principle was that we were not going to throw anything into the ocean that wasn't biodegradable. It's amazing with the recent lockdown, the panic over toilet roll. Actually, toilet roll, in my personal opinion, is not necessarily the most hygienic way of keeping yourself clean and hygienic. There are other ways to do it. But I've included this photo because when we do these presentations to schools, especially primary schools, they always ask you, how do you go to the toilet in the middle of the ocean? Well, this hopefully answers that question. Hopefully this plays okay. This is a little clip of swimming halfway across the ocean. Okay, bear with me. Okay, I'm sorry about that, folks. The video doesn't want to play. I think there's quite a lot of bandwidth being used here. But in essence, what I was getting at was we halfway across, about 1,500 miles from land, I think about 4 kilometers deep. We took it in terms of jumping off the side of the boat and swimming away from the boat. And it's the most liberating experience that I've ever had, where you're completely alone and you have a little boat, which is an oasis of safety, and you swim away from it. It's a fantastic experience. But I think it's important to remember that whatever project or whatever task that you get embedded in and that you're focused on day in, day out, it's important to take time to stop and enjoy where you are and what you're doing. So time out is really important. We also, in terms of planning, we took enough food for 50 days at sea. But we did know that we could be up to 110, 120 days at sea, depending on what the weather conditions were like. So one of the things that we took along with us was a fishing rod, and we had quite a lot of debate whether to take it or not, because it's quite a big item. But it did give us the opportunity to fish whenever the weather was calm, which supplemented our diet with fresh fish, which was fantastic on the way over. I think humans need humor, sorry. And with lots of time in our hands, it's easy to kind of get bored of the same old conversations. But stopping, laughing, enjoying the time that you have with your team is really important. Going back to the fact that whatever project you're doing, whatever you're involved with, there are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be things that crop up and that need to be dealt with. Poor old Simon got quite a nasty cut on his finger that was sustained whenever we were doing some maintenance in the boat. One of the rowing positions was broken. And although the cut itself, we managed to stitch it up fine, wasn't too bad. It was quite deep and there was quite a lot of blood. It caused him to have a small seizure on the boat, which was very, very worrying indeed. But he seemed to come round out of it. And it's just that when you're tired and you're malnutritioned, actually the impact of even relatively minor injuries can be significant. On the 26th of February 2012, 45 days, 17 hours later, we arrived into Barbados. Slightly broken, a lot smaller than where we were when we left, but absolutely delighted and feeling very, very grateful for being on the other side. It's when you undertake a challenge, whatever that is, whether it could be completing an environmental project, it could be to produce something or some resources that are really important to you. When you get that sense of achievement, it helps you to understand the importance of friends and family and helps you to really appreciate who's the most important things in life. So my suggestion would be that challenge is important. It's not something that we should see as negative. Challenge is a positive thing and we can gain very positive things from it. Absolutely, as we go through whatever that challenge is, there's going to be things that are difficult, but as long as we stay focused, we have the right people around us, we have the right team, and we have the management systems in place and the mutual respect for the people that we work with, then we can come out the other side both stronger with a greater experience and ability to apply what we've learned very, very well. Okay, so the last photo of Alistair is an unfortunate one because he doesn't look very happy, but he was happy. He was just reflecting on everything that we had been through. So to summarize, I'm going to send a link to a little video that Alistair did of our row, which I think helps to demonstrate everything that was involved in it. But in summary, whatever task you're going to undertake, it's important that you plan what you're going to do, that you surround yourself with the right people who aren't always the same people, that you maintain positivity as much as you can, to expect the unexpected, that there's going to be difficulties on the way. But when those difficulties do come up, that you ask for and that you accept help and you offer help to the other people around you, and that you have mutual respect for the positions that people hold. So if you're talking about college projects, then planning how you're going to do it and giving people specific tasks. And if you're the person that has the task and you can't do it for whatever reason, making sure that you let other people know that that's the case. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope you found it interesting. If you've got any questions or you'd like to know anything more, you can email me at info@h2otraining.co.uk, or you can find me on Facebook, H2O Training, or on Instagram, again, H2O Training. Thank you very much.